If you watched our Saturday Night Live, you saw that we picked these 2 chairs and this bench up at the thrift store. So today we're going to show you how we transform them and do the upholstery.
So the bench is actually really sturdy, but the seat is not so sturdy. It's got a little bit of break right there. I'm gonna glue this up, see if I can get that to fit back tight so that that's not moving around. And then this part here is broken and cracked, but it's got a broken piece right here. So I'm gonna cut a new wood insert for this and then glue and clamp this up. These 2 chairs here have nail head trim all along the edge, and they're probably hiding staples up underneath. So I'm gonna get the nail head off and then we'll pull the rest of the fabric off. So at this point you could carefully pull all these staples out so that you can keep this as a pattern, but I think I've seen Jami use a pattern to upholster like once. She just puts it on there and cuts the excess fabric off. So I'm just cutting this fabric on the top so that I can pull it down over the side, and then I'll have something good to grab a hold of and rip this off of here. We're going to be leaving these chairs black, but they've already got some good chips and dings and scrapes, and it's not super uniform throughout. Obviously we like to have kind of natural chippy wear, but we're going to help it out a little bit. I'm going to be distressing it with some 220 sandpaper, maybe just to bring that out even a little more and smooth some things out. Now that they're all sanded up, I'm just going to take a damp cloth and wipe off all of the sanding dust and some of the black dust that got in here. And then I'm going to seal them up with some Sweet Pickins top coat. The seat frames are all glued up and done drying. Now I'm going to paint this in DIY beadboard, and then we'll distress it, seal it, and Jami will get the seats upholstered.
We're going to put this fabric on these seats. I used 3/4 yard of fabric because these seats are pretty wide. I've got a little bit more than I need on each side, but not enough to really do anything with because the fabric's like 45 inches wide. So I'll just cut that off in a minute. What I like to do on seats like this is I pull it through and make sure that I've got enough fabric over here. Holding the fabric, I hold it back. I'm going to make 2 cuts. Cut off the excess. And then I'm going to cut down a little bit further. What you're doing is you're just making it so you can get around this post that's right here. You're going to tuck that under, and you're going to pull the one side around and make sure that you've got enough fabric to get you all the way over to the edge. That's important because if you cut it too short, then you're not going to be able to cover the fabric. And when I do the other side, I'm just going to make one cut kind of at an angle. So I've got a little extra fabric to work with. and then just pull it through. And then I'll know where to make my other cut, to tuck it under, and just kind of work with it. Make sure I don't have any puckers. Now I've got fabric back here to work with to cover up this. I'll just fold this under and fold that a little bit so you have a nice crisp edge. And then once this is stapled across the back, then I'll work on the opposite side. I'm using my Harbor Freight Central Pneumatic staple gun. I've got 1/2 inch 18 gauge staples loaded up in here, and I'm going to, again, just make sure my fabric's in the right spot. So you want to always make sure when you're doing these cuts that you leave yourself enough fabric that you can fold over your edge so you don't have a raw edge there. As I'm making each staple, I'm feeling with my hand where this piece is, and I'm stapling just above it. When I'm all finished, I'll take and trim this out before I put my braided trim on there to cover my staple. I'm doing the staples about every 1/2 inch. And I'm peeking because this is like really curvy. So I just want to make sure I'm not stapling in the wrong spot, because that's annoying. All right, so once I get this close to this, I like to actually pull this really tight over and do the last staple so I don't get some weird puckers. And I'm just gonna come in and put this one in, and then I'll come in and staple through here. There we go, back's done. Now we're gonna go around to the front, and then we'll do the sides. When you're doing a checkered or striped print, you're gonna wanna make sure that all your stripes are straight and not pulled in any which way. So now that I've done that, and I kind of lined this fabric up so this middle stripe is directly down the center of the chair, it just looks a little neater. And you're gonna pull it tight, but not so tight that you've got puckers. And you may get some slight puckers here, but when you pull this the other way, it will kind of alleviate that. You wanna make sure you've got the same amount of tension when you're doing this all the way across, because otherwise you'll get uneven pulling and you'll get wrinkles. I'm gonna stop when I get to here because the corners I'm gonna do last. So I'm just gonna go to about 1 inch from the edge. So I have a wrinkle in my fabric. If that does not come out when I upholster each side, then I will come back with my steamer and take that wrinkle out. If you don't have access to a steamer, then I would suggest ironing out any wrinkles before you get started. Again, I'm starting in the middle. I'm just working my way to each side. Okay, now when I get to this corner, I'm gonna take and fold my fabric under. If you've got like a big bunch like this, just cut off the excess so you don't have a big wad of fabric. And I'm just gonna fold this as neatly and tightly as possible and put this staple in. Then I'll come across here and staple along. And see how I've got this excess fabric here? Before I even staple that, I'm gonna cut that off. Don't have to deal with it. All right, so I'm just coming along the side, and again, just like the front, I'm just pulling it so it's tight, but not so I've got a ton of wrinkles. Okay, once I get to the corner, I'm gonna leave it. I'll do the front 2 corners last. Okay, so I'm gonna come to this edge. Now that I'm getting close, I'm gonna pull that as tight as I can. Okay, so I'm just gonna come and staple this edge and then go around. Okay, now I'm at the corners. I just take the fabric and I pull it down like this. Your chair may be a little different, so you may get some puckering. I'm gonna probably have like 1 pleat in the corner, and that's okay. So I'm gonna have this little right here. That's my pleat. And I just want to make sure it's neat. So I take this excess fabric, fold it over, and then staple on one side, staple on the other side, and then you've just got the teeny tiniest little pleat. And once I put the trim on, you probably won't even see much of that. Same thing on this side. Now that that is complete, I will trim off all this excess fabric. We will be ready to trim it out with some braided trim. I'm using high temp glue sticks that you can pick up at your local craft store that are made for fabric, and I'm going to just take this trim that I purchased at the craft store. It's probably 1 inch or close to it wide. And I'm gonna get started. I like to work in small sections. And you should, if you're worried about burning yourself, you can use like a silicone mat or silicone gloves to protect your fingers. The nice thing when you can find trim this wide is that it will cover a lot of mistakes. On my next project that we're working on, I'm using skinnier trim, so I'm gonna have to be super careful when I'm cutting my fabric and stapling that I'm neat. And this is just for looks. The fabric is actually being held on by the staples. So that's why it is okay to use hot glue as long as it's high temp and made for fabric. If you buy a chair and it has trim on it like this, chances are it's been hot glued. Most of the ones I find are just using high temp hot glue.
I'm sealing the piece with Sweet Pickins top coat, same as I did the 2 black chairs, but on this white there's really not much to see. I just wanted to let you know that that's what I was sealing it with.
Down in this little corner here, there's this little bit of white fabric peeking through. The best way would be to not have that showing at all and having this be perfect, but inevitably it happens. And in a case where I have black paint and black trim, I take my permanent marker and I come in here and all that fabric gets painted black, and then that white part goes completely away. So if you're wondering why I'm using these scissors that are definitely not sewing scissors and don't cut very well, it's because my daughter Eliza uses all of my scissors for crafting. I can never find them, and when they come back they're no longer sharp. So definitely I suggest if you're going to do a lot of sewing or upholstery, get 1 pair of good scissors and hide them well. The next project we're working on is the bench. I chose this gray and cream and white, very neutral floral, so that way it could go with any design. It's from Hobby Lobby, as is the fabric that I was using before, and it's duck cloth, so it's a good weight. And I only got 3/4 of a yard to do both cushions because it's not gonna take very much. So this, I'm just going to use my finger, fill around the edge, and staple across one side, then staple the other opposite side, and then I'll do the other side and trim it. It's pretty straightforward. If I had good scissors, this is where it would come in handy. I'm gonna cut as close to these staples as possible because the trim I have for this is much thinner, so I don't have a lot of room for error. But I just kind of pull the fabric up and cut right along the line. So I like to offset my trim instead of going right on the corner, which would make it look weird. I wouldn't be able to turn it. I like to come in about 1 inch from the edge and start here. And actually, let's see, this is the back, so I'm gonna start over here. And I come from the side, I don't know if you saw me do this on the other chair, and kind of scoop up the fabric, so that way if there's any loose ends, it kind of glues underneath the trim. So when the edge starts to fray like that, I just take a lighter and very carefully heat seal the edge. That way I don't have any frays.
A couple quick repairs on the woodworking end of it, some paint and a little bit of distressing, and these are like new chairs with new fabric and a bench.
Yeah, don't forget the hard work on the upholstery.
I think that actually took about twice as long as the painting and the gluing up did.
It actually wasn't too bad. The more upholstery you do, the faster you get at it. These seats, if they had arms, it would be a little bit more difficult because then you have to cut around the arms, but just cutting around the backs isn't too complicated. The part where you really want to be patient for, and sometimes you feel like you won't be, is the end. When you're putting that trim on, it can make or break your upholstery job. You want it to be nice and neat, cover up all your staples, not have glue all over the place. So if you're not familiar with doing it, just go nice and slow and take your time, because you don't want to spend all this time doing a project and then mess it up with a trim, because it's very hard to fix it if you get goopy glue everywhere.
Yeah, I don't do trim. It's way too meticulous for me. I did it one time, and Jamie the next day had to redo it, so I don't.
Yeah, you can't distress trim, it needs to be neat. So here's a rundown of products that we used today. We used DIY paint and beadboard, Sweet Pickins top coat on this. We wound up also sealing these chairs with the top coat just to give them a nice even sheen and some extra durability, since I'm not sure what they were initially painted with. I want to make sure the end result as well. We wound up using our pneumatic staple gun from Harbor Freight with 1/2" 18 gauge staples. So you can pick that up at Harbor Freight, and then it's gonna need an air compressor. What size air compressor?
Oh, you could run that with a little pot compressor, just a little bitty one.
Yeah. Do your friends like DIY? Be sure to share this video with them. We love meeting new people and sharing our techniques. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Jami Ray Vintage for more
DIY.